You know that feeling? Just drowning in information, everyone's shouting about the right way to do things.
Oh, yeah. Information overload.
Exactly. It feels impossible sometimes to cut through all that noise and find what actually matters for you.
Hmm.
Well, that's exactly why we're here. Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through the clutter, pull out the insights that, actually stick, giving you the knowledge minus the overwhelm.
And today, we're tackling a really big one, a huge decision lots of people face,
Hmm.
the whole question of college.
Yeah.
Our source material is the book Drop Out and Get Schooled by Patrick Bet-David with Thomas N. Ellsworth. And, I mean, that title alone,
Mm.
it makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It definitely grabbed my attention. And that's really the core of it, isn't it? We're diving into the arguments around whether college is the automatic next step for everyone.
Right.
So our mission here for this deep dive is to really understand who these authors think should, seriously consider not going to college,
Mhm.
who they think absolutely should go, and the reasons, the sort of fundamental logic behind those views. Think of this as your guide, helping you navigate this really crucial crossroads.
And what makes this particularly interesting, I think, is the authors themselves. They come from pretty different places.
How so?
Well, you've got Patrick Bet-David, successful entrepreneur, didn't finish college, and then Thomas Ellsworth, who has advanced degrees, experience in business and academia.
Okay, so opposing viewpoints baked right in.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least different perspectives. It promises a pretty balanced look at the whole thing.
Okay, let's get right to it then. Why is there this almost automatic pressure, this assumption that everyone just has to go to college? It feels so, I don't know, ingrained.
Yeah, the book tackles that head on. They call it a kind of robotic march towards college.
Robotic merge, I like that.
Yeah, the societal expectation that it's just the default path, the only route to a, quote, good job. They argue it's become this generational habit, almost.
Like tradition on autopilot?
Exactly. Something people do just because, well, that's what's always been done. Passed down without maybe enough critical thought each time.
And then you layer on the peer pressure,
Yeah.
right? Especially in high school. That must be intense.
Oh, for sure. The book talks about how students may be feeling a bit insecure about their own future,
Yeah.
might brag about their college plans. It's like a cover,
Yeah.
to seem like they've got it all figured out.
Makes sense. Social currency.
Precisely. A way to fit in. Avoid feeling, I don't know, left behind, even if they haven't really thought through what they want to study or achieve.
So just follow the crowd?
Mm-hmm. And potentially end up with a pile of debt and a degree that doesn't actually line up with a career they want. So it's not just about jobs, it's social standing, avoiding that feeling of failure, even if the path isn't right for them.
And it's not just the kids pushing each other, is it? Parents are a huge factor.
Oh, absolutely massive.
Yeah.
The authors talk about parental peer pressure, too. Parents pushing kids towards college because, well, maybe they want to protect them. Or perhaps they're trying to, live vicariously through their kids' achievements. Or maybe it's just keeping up with their own friends, their social circle. What will people think if my kid doesn't go?
Yeah, the keeping up with the Joneses mentality, but for your kid's education, like a status symbol.
It really can be seen that way in some circles, yeah. But the book also takes a pretty critical look at the education industry itself.
How so? What's their take there?
Well, they frame it as this huge financial entity, a multi-billion-dollar industry with a clear vested interest in promoting higher ed.
Makes sense from a business perspective, I guess.
Right. They point to the massive tax-exempt endowments these places have. And they raise questions like, do all the professors, especially outside the hard sciences, really have enough, real-world private sector experience?
That's a provocative point. Like teaching a business strategy if you've never actually run a business in a competitive market.
Exactly. The book really emphasizes that the private sector demands results,
Yep.
efficiency, things that aren't always the top priority in, let's say, a more theoretical academic setting.
Right. Different pressures, different bottom lines.
And to really drive this point home, they have this Dropout Hall of Fame. It's a list of super successful people who didn't finish college.
Okay.
And they make the point. It's full of entrepreneurs, innovators, but you won't find any, say, cardiologists on that list.
Huh. Okay, yeah, that illustrates it pretty clearly. College is essential for some paths, maybe not others.
Precisely. It depends dramatically on what you want to do.
Now, what about the networking argument? That's one you hear constantly. You got to go to college to build your network.
Yeah, they push back on that pretty hard, especially now, right? In our hyper-connected world.
With LinkedIn and everything.
Exactly. LinkedIn, social media.
Yeah.
They give an example of this woman, Juliana, from Germany, who just proactively reached out online, networked her way into learning opportunities, even got an internship just by being persistent and showing initiative.
So the argument is you don't necessarily need the ivy-covered walls and the tuition bill to build connections anymore.
That's what they contend, yeah. You can be proactive anywhere.
Okay, so they've laid out the reasons for this societal push, this robotic march. But they aren't saying college is always bad, are they? Who do they think should go?
No, no, definitely not anti-college across the board. They're very clear. College is absolutely essential for professionals.
Yeah.
People in advanced sciences, medicine.
Your doctors, your engineers.
Exactly. Researchers, too. They stress the vital hands-on training, the specialized resources universities offer for these fields. They even mention Bill Gates talking positively about places like Caltech. For those careers, that deep knowledge base, both theoretical and practical, it's just indispensable.
Makes total sense. You definitely don't want someone operating on you who learned brain surgery from TikTok.
Right. Definitely not.
So professionals, what other groups do they say should consider college?
Well, they bring up athletic scholarships, which is interesting. But they make a really important distinction. They kind of exclude the big money sports like football, basketball,
Yeah.
where they acknowledge there's potential for, exploitation.
Right, the student-athlete debate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for sports like, say, swimming, tennis, golf, where the dynamics might be different, a scholarship can be a fantastic route, a way to get a high-quality education, often STEM-focused apparently, without that crushing financial burden.
That's a really interesting nuance. Not just sports scholarships good, but which sports and why. What about people who maybe don't fit the typical college material image?
Yeah, this was surprising to me. They suggest that they sort of label as lazy people, or maybe those with the habit of not finishing things.
Wait, lazy people should go to college. How does that work?
Well, specifically community college. They argue the structure there could actually be beneficial, help them mature, learn a work ethic, maybe gain some focused skills. They give the example of getting a CompTIA plus certification.
Ah, okay. So community college as a stepping stone, a
Right.
place to build habits and skills without the huge commitment of a 4-year university right away.
Exactly. Lower pressure, lower cost, a chance to kind of grow up a bit and figure things out.
That makes more sense. And who are the sort of ideal candidates for that traditional 4-year path in their view?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. People who know exactly what they want in life.
Simple as that.
Pretty much. If you have a clear passion, a specific career goal, and that path definitely requires a 4-year degree, then yeah, college is the logical, beneficial choice. Go for it.
All right, so now we get to the part that might raise a few eyebrows. Who do Bet David and Ellsworth suggest should really think twice about college or maybe even consider dropping out?
Yeah, this is where the book's title really comes into play. They kick off this section by stating something pretty stark. A college degree is no guarantee of success.
Okay, that's a common sentiment, but they really lean into it.
They do. And they highlight the huge problem of underemployment among graduates. People with degrees, working jobs that don't even require one.
Right. All that time, all that money for a job you could have maybe gotten anyway. That definitely makes you question the return on investment.
It really does. So who might be better off skipping it or leaving?
Mm.
They point to people with a strong work ethic, but not clear direction.
Okay, so motivated, hardworking, but kind of lost.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Willing to put in the effort, but haven't quite found their thing yet. The authors argue that for these folks, jumping straight into an entrepreneurial path, learning by doing, might actually be a faster, more rewarding route.
The Learn by Doing School of Hard Knocks.
They reference that, that legendary list of super successful dropout entrepreneurs.
Rates, Zuckerberg, the usual suspects.
Those guys, yeah. So maybe bypass the classroom, get real-world experience faster.
What about personality? Does that factor into their advice?
Oh, definitely. They talk about obsessive personality.
Obsessive,
Yeah.
in a bad way.
Not necessarily. They use the analogy of someone who can just get completely lost in a video game for hours and hours. Intense focus.
Okay. I know people like that.
Right. They suggest that same level of intense dedication, that hyper-focus, can be incredibly powerful if you channel it into building a business or some other kind of entrepreneurial venture.
Huh. So redirecting that obsessive energy from, say, gaming to creating something new.
Exactly. It's about harnessing that drive for a different kind of win.
That's a really interesting take. What about the people who are just completely unsure, like, I have no idea what I want to do?
For the fully undecided, their advice is pretty strong. Start at a local community college, a 2-year program.
Okay, same advice as for the lazy ones, but for a different reason.
Sort of, yeah. But here the emphasis is on exploration and cost saving. Live at home, try out different subjects, get those basic general ed courses out of the way without spending a fortune.
Right. Lower risk, lower cost way to explore options before committing to a pricey 4-year degree you might not even finish or use.
Precisely. It buys you time to figure things out without racking up massive debt.
Makes a lot of sense. What about specific skills or talents? Do they highlight any of those?
They do. They specifically call out people who are great in sales.
Really? Salespeople shouldn't go to college.
Well, they argue that if you have that natural talent, that knack for sales, you might be way better off just honing those skills directly through specific training programs, online resources, things like that.
So skip the general degree and just focus on the core skill.
Yeah, they quote Skilled Up, I think, talking about how valuable sales skills are, transferable, and the income potential can be, basically unlimited. Why wait 4 years if you can start building that career now?
Interesting. Cutting out the middleman, kind of. What other types of people do they suggest might thrive outside the traditional college track?
They mention those who are a bit rebellious.
The troublemakers.
Maybe. Or maybe just people who question the status quo. They suggest that tendency, if you channel it constructively, become a rebel with a worthy cause, can be a real engine for innovation, for starting something new.
Okay, I can see that.
Also, self-disciplined and competitive individuals. The argument is that their natural drive, their focus, often aligns perfectly with the intense demands of entrepreneurship.
Like the Bezos and Musk types they probably mentioned?
Exactly. They cite examples like Bezos building Amazon, Musk with PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX. These are people inherently driven to achieve, not afraid to carve their own path. That drive might be better served outside academia.
So driven, rebellious, competitive, anyone else?
Yeah, a couple more. People who make friends easily.
Oh.
The idea is if networking comes naturally to you, you might not need the structured social environment of college to build connections. You'll do it anyway.
Okay.
And they put a huge emphasis on having a mentor.
A mentor, more valuable than college.
They argue that learning directly from a successful CEO, a founder in your field, that hands-on guidance could potentially be worth far more than, say, an expensive Harvard MBA. They even bring up Mark McCormick's classic book.
What they don't teach you at Harvard Business School. Yeah, I know that one.
Right. Underscoring that value of real-world practical wisdom over purely academic knowledge.
That theme of direct practical experience really runs through their whole argument, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
The outline also mentions some outside perspectives they bring in, like Sienna Beard.
Yeah, they incorporate her 5 reasons why you shouldn't go to college, which kind of reinforces their points with very practical concerns. Things like needing to work right now, for financial reasons.
Can't afford not to work.
Exactly. Or the risk of just overwhelming student loans. Or simply not knowing what you want to study yet. Or realizing the career you do want doesn't actually require a degree.
Right, or maybe just not being academically ready for the challenge of college right now.
Precisely. Very down-to-earth reasons that resonate with a lot of people.
And what about Ryan Holiday? His perspective is usually quite thought-provoking.
For sure. They discuss his blog post, How Dropping Out of College Can Save Your Life.
Wow, strong title.
Yeah. Holiday talks about this idea that sometimes to really grow, you have to, kill a few of one's natural selves. Let go of paths that aren't truly yours.
Interesting concept.
He also pushes back against the idea that dropping out is automatically some kind of failure. And he gives practical advice like have savings, build your network anyway, stay grounded, always be learning, take note.
Good practical stuff.
And he makes a really key point about not confusing your passion with your profession. Maybe you love teaching, but you don't need to be a professor. You could create online courses or mentor people, find different ways to apply your interests.
So a more holistic view of finding your path beyond just the traditional job title.
Exactly, focusing on personal growth and exploring different avenues.
Now, the book doesn't just talk about individual choices, right? It gets into the money side of things, the business of college.
Oh yeah, they definitely go there. They dedicate a big chunk to questioning whether the current system really prioritizes student learning, or if students are sometimes treated more like, customers.
Yeah.
Revenue sources.
That's a pretty cynical take. What evidence do they offer?
Well, they point to the really high dropout rates,
Mm.
alarmingly high, and the human cost of that, all these students left with debt, but no degree to show for it.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. You start with hope and with debt and no diploma.
And they dig into this issue of student retention. The idea that some schools might be more focused on their U.S. news rankings and attracting new students
Right, keeping the numbers up.
than on genuinely supporting the students they already have, making sure they succeed academically.
Hmm.
They even make a pretty stark comparison. They bring up the GM faulty ignition switch scandal.
Whoa, really? How do they connect those?
The parallel they draw is that in both cases, the argument could be made that the well-being of the customer or the student seemed secondary to, like, institutional metrics or the bottom line. It's a provocative comparison, for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely provocative. And just the sheer cost of college these days. It's undeniable, isn't it?
Utterly undeniable. Staggering, really. They show how college costs have exploded since, like, 1971. Compared to other big expenses, like housing, college tuition, both public and private, has risen way, way faster.
It feels like it's almost exponentially higher than when our parents went.
It practically is. And this, of course, directly fuels the student loan debt crisis. The book points out something mind-blowing.
What's that?
Total student loan debt in the U.S. has actually surpassed total credit card debt.
Wow. Okay, that really puts the scale of it into perspective. More than all credit card debt combined.
Mind-blowing, right? It just shows how huge this issue has become.
And what about the government's role in all this? Are they just an innocent bystander?
Well, the book argues no. They get into how the federal government actually profits from federal student loans.
Profits from student loans.
They point to analysis, like stuff highlighted during Bernie Sanders' campaign, suggesting the government was projected to make something like $110 billion in profit from student loans over a decade.
Wait, the government makes money when students take out loans?
That's the argument presented. It definitely raises questions about the incentives baked into the system, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Wow. And then you see universities, even ones with these enormous endowments, billions of dollars sometimes, still hitting up alumni for donations constantly. It feels a bit ironic.
That's another point they make, yeah. The irony of asking for more money when you're sitting on a massive endowment. And they also take aim at textbook costs.
Textbooks, the bane of every student's existence.
Right. To give an example.
Yeah.
A textbook that costs maybe $200 for the student might only cost like $5 to actually print.
Ouch. $5 to print, $200 to buy.
Yeah. They see it as another way the whole college financial machine might be taking advantage of a captive audience, the students.
So it paints a picture of a system with some serious structural issues and questionable financial practices, at least according to the authors.
That's definitely the picture they paint, yeah.
Okay, so if someone reads all this and they're seriously thinking, maybe college isn't for me, or maybe I should leave, what concrete advice does the book give them? Just walk away.
No, definitely not. Just walk away.
Right.
The absolute core message here is, before you drop out, have a plan.
Have a plan. Okay.
They even quote Jim Rohn, who said something like, a spontaneous reaction is not a plan. It needs thought.
Right. Don't just rage quit college.
Exactly. So they outline 5 key steps, 5 things to have in place.
Okay, what are they?
First, have a real plan for support. How are you going to support yourself? What's your income source?
Makes sense. Gotta eat it.
Second, learn sales. They hammer this home sales as a crucial skill no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Learn how to sell yourself, your ideas, a product.
Okay. Income sales. What's third?
Third, learn self-discipline. Real self-discipline. They even suggest the military is one possible, though extreme, way to forge that. The point is, you need discipline if you're going out on your own.
Right. No professor setting deadlines anymore.
Fourth, try to work under a successful CEO entrepreneur, even for free.
For free? Why?
To soak up invaluable real-world experience and mentorship. They mentioned Sean Kim's story working at Ripe. Get that inside look.
Okay, so apprentice yourself, basically. And the 5th step?
Fifth is simple but crucial. Just get real-world experience. Get out there, do things, learn by doing. It's not just about leaving academia. It's about proactively moving towards something concrete.
That's really solid, practical advice. Don't just leave. Build an alternative. Have a destination.
Exactly.
Now, the outline also mentions something called a blue ocean strategy applied to education. What's that about?
Yeah, that's a concept from a business strategy book called Blue Ocean Strategy. The basic idea is instead of competing head-to-head in crowded markets, red oceans full of sharks, you should look for uncontested market space, blue oceans, where you can create new value, new demand.
Okay, creating new markets instead of fighting over existing ones. How does that apply to college?
Well, Bet David and Ellsworth used the four actions framework from that strategy to reimagine higher education. The four actions are create, minimize, increase, and eliminate.
Okay, let's break that down. What do they suggest colleges should create?
They propose creating curricula that are like better matched to different personality types, not one size fits all. Also, creating real entrepreneurial experiences much earlier for students. And developing more low-cost online universities, but offering a wider range of subjects, not just STEM.
Interesting. More personalization, more practical experience, more accessible options. What should be minimized?
They suggest minimizing the reliance on excessive standardized testing, and also minimizing the traditional four-year time frame. Maybe develop more focused, intense programs like 18 months for certain degrees.
Faster, more focused paths.
Okay.
And what needs to be increased?
This is where they get really practical, I think. They argue for a massive increase in education on essential life skills, things everyone actually needs.
Like what specifically?
Like understanding marriage, the stats, the challenges, conflict resolution, parenting fundamentals, how to actually find a job, nail an interview, people skills, leadership skills, understanding taxes, personal, state, federal, FICA, Medicare.
Wow, yeah, stuff they definitely don't teach you in most Poli-Sci 101 classes.
Right. And understanding politics, but from both sides, unbiased. Maybe even covering the content of the U.S. citizenship test so everyone understands the basics of civics, leadership styles, trade schools.
So real-world, practical life knowledge, things you actually use day to day.
Exactly. Plus, more robust online education options like Coursera, Code Academy, Udacity. They even mention their own platform, Entrepreneur University, or EU.
That's a pretty comprehensive list of additions. Skills for life, not just for a specific job. And finally, what do they think should be eliminated?
The main thing they target for elimination is the mindset, the resistance to change within the system itself, that ingrained inertia that often blocks innovation and adaptation.
So eliminate the "we've always done it this way" mentality.
Pretty much, yeah. That's the biggest hurdle to overcome, in their view.
That's quite a vision for shaking up higher education, a pretty radical overhaul.
It definitely is.
Okay, so our last main point is about processing all this. For someone listening, facing this decision, how do the authors suggest they actually think through it?
They really stress the importance of dialogue, thoughtful debate, specifically with trusted mentors, people who have perspective, who can offer objective advice.
Not just talking to your buddies who are all going to the same state school.
Right. Get different perspectives.
Yeah.
And they illustrate this really well using co-author Thomas Ellsworth's own life. They present two conversations.
Yeah.
One is the conversation that did happen. It was with his dad.
Yeah.
Tom was interested in marine biology. Sounds cool, right? But his dad asked these really smart, probing questions. Like, okay, what jobs can you actually get with that degree? What's the reality of the job market look like? And those questions led Tom to realize maybe that wasn't the most viable path for him, and he shifted towards business.
Wow, so his dad guided him through questioning the practicality. What was the other conversation?
The other one is the conversation that never happened. It's hypothetical.
Ah, okay.
In this version, his dad is even more direct, offers really objective insight into Tom's actual skills, his natural talents, and guides him to think longer term about career paths that really align with those strengths, maybe paths Tom hadn't even considered.
So the power of objective feedback and guidance from someone who knows you, but can also see the bigger picture.
Exactly. It highlights how crucial those kinds of honest, sometimes difficult conversations can be.
So what are the key questions the book suggests individuals ask themselves when they're at this crossroads?
They boil it down to a few core things. First, what do I genuinely enjoy doing? Like long-term, what holds my interest?
Okay, start with passion or enjoyment.
Second, how can I realistically maximize my income pursuing those interests? Be practical about the financial side.
Right. Passion meets paycheck.
Third, do I actually need a college degree for the path I'm considering? Really question if it's a requirement or just an assumption. And fourth, a big one, do I see myself primarily as an employee working for others or as an entrepreneur building my own thing?
Employee versus entrepreneur. That's a fundamental fork in the road.
It really is. And they also add that life experience changes you. Your perspective shifts. So it's important to keep questioning things, always, including questioning whether the education system itself might inadvertently indoctrinate you into certain ways of thinking.
Question everything, even the value of the questioning process itself sometimes, maybe, huh?
Yeah, maybe. But definitely question the assumptions.
So it's really a journey of self-discovery, seeking wise counsel, and refusing to just accept the default path without scrutiny.
That sums it up perfectly. It's about making a conscious, informed, deeply personal choice that's right for you, not just following the herd.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. This deep dive into drop out and get schooled. It really hammers home a central message for you, our listener, doesn't it?
It really does.
That decision about college is profoundly personal. It absolutely requires you to take a hard, honest look at your own passions, your unique skills, your long-term goals.
Yeah.
And it really shouldn't just be driven by what society expects or what your friends are doing or, that ingrained pressure we talked about.
Absolutely. And the book's goal, fundamentally, isn't just to bash higher education. It's really to spark a conversation,
Right.
to empower you listening right now, to actually engage in thoughtful decision-making about your own future, your education, your career path. It's about making your best choice.
And so, on that note, here's maybe a final provocative thought for you to really chew on after this. Are you actively questioning the default paths laid out for you? Are you really taking the time to explore maybe unconventional routes, ways to learn, ways to succeed that genuinely resonate with your unique potential? Maybe spend some time thinking about which of the perspectives we discussed today really hit home for you. Which character type, which argument, which piece of advice, what resonated.
And maybe more importantly, why did it resonate?
Exactly. Why that one? Because digging into that why, that's probably where you'll find the real insight. That's where your unique path forward starts to emerge.